maybe even ask something different from what we're talking about, but you believe that it's legal related and you want to jump in on the conversation, you can do that by calling 727 441 3000. Again, the call in number is going to be 727 441 3000. And that's going to be the number to get your call in tonight live on the air. You can talk to myself and my co-host, who I'll introduce to you in just a second. But if you're a bit more reserved, not really wanting to talk live on the air, but you do have a question that's burning and you'd like to get that in, you can also do that online because we are streaming right now on Facebook. So if you go onto Facebook and you have a Facebook account, you can log in to our live feed, which is on our Facebook page, which is at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes Injury Lawyers. Perenich is spelled Perenich. If you type that into your Facebook search bar, you should see the live circle showing that it's red and that we're live right now. If you click on that, you'll see Lori and I in the studio, and that's where you would comment at the bottom and leave your question or your comment and to discuss whatever it is you'd like. And I'll read that out live, and Lori and I can, of course, discuss it and answer whatever questions you may have. If you yourself don't have a question tonight, but you're interested in the topic, or you feel like a family member or friend might be interested, please share it. Go ahead and share the live feed. We're not just on Facebook, we're also on YouTube. So if you're not a Facebook user, but you do have YouTube and you want to keep listening after you get out of your car, go ahead and log into YouTube and search the same way, Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes Injury Lawyers. You'll be able to watch the show live on YouTube as well. So share it with your family and your friends. Tell them to tune in. We're here for the next hour, giving you a little bit of info on legal matters. We are civil litigation attorneys. And so, of course, we're going to talk to you a little bit tonight about some personal injury related topics and just various litigation things. But like I said, if you have other legal questions and you want to get those in, please do not hesitate to give us a call. The lines are open, and I am happy to be here with my co-host, Lori Robinson, who, of course, you all know quite well. She has been a frequent co-host and guest on the show. She's, of course, my colleague at the firm, Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. I'll give her a moment just to say, of course, hello to all of our listeners.
Yes, I'm always happy to join the host as we talk to the community about legal issues, particularly personal injury issues. It's always a lot of fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's just a fun time of year. I know, hopefully, if you've been listening to the station, you're hearing the holiday music. It's that time. It's that time of year. I'm not going to do my Mariah Carey "It's Time" impression, but she's become deemed, I think, the queen of Christmas because of the popularity of her song. And so you see her a lot during the Christmas time. And so everyone kind of uses that now as her "It's time."
Yes.
But it's that time of year. I don't know about you, Lori, but I do enjoy the holidays quite a bit. Although they come around a lot faster than they used to, it seems like.
And the idea that, and somebody in one of my church things was pointing out, like, it's Advent and it starts, it's leading up to Christmas, and you start in December. We have actually started on December 1st.
Right.
Which means there's only 25 days.
Exactly.
Exactly 25 days. So
exactly
it's like,
right. And it's like, wow, I just feel like I was just buying Christmas gifts a couple weeks ago for last Christmas.
I've got my tree, my live tree. That's always a tradition after the day after Thanksgiving, or I got it on Saturday, actually. It's beautiful. I think it's one of the freshest ones I've had because it keeps, it's drinking like close to 2 or 3 cups of water. It's like, oh my goodness. But I have to get it decorated because we don't have much time before Christmas.
It is absolutely upon us. So just about 3 weeks away. I do have a tree up, but it's only partially decorated, so we'll finish that. The tree's been up for about a week, but the decorations are taking longer than expected. So, but we'll get that done. And but anyway, I know we talked off the air about, of course, Thanksgiving and how everybody gathers together. And it got me to thinking about all the different things that are going to be going on, wonderful things, parties, Christmas gatherings, family get-togethers. People probably, last week had lots of family get-togethers, and even this new thing that people are doing, like Friendsgivings, where they get together with friends before Thanksgiving, and they call it Friendsgiving.
Oh, never heard that. That's
yeah,
a good idea.
It's a new thing that I think a lot of people are doing. I actually went to one, and I think it's nice because you don't always necessarily spend Thanksgiving with your friends.
That's true.
You're usually spending it with your family,
Sure.
and so just a way to do the same thing with some of your friends as well, almost like a pre-Thanksgiving. But either way,
must be scaled down a little bit, or at least somebody else does it. You have to rotate it back, probably.
You got to rotate the host, but as you can imagine, you're inviting people into your homes. There's parties, there's office parties, there's drinks and celebrations and all these wonderful things. But sometimes those things come with consequences, and so I wanted to kind of go through some of those topics and get people just to be thinking, not to put a damper on the festivities,
sure.
but just to be, aware and obviously knowledgeable as we go into this holiday season. As I said, it's extremely enjoyable time of year for me. I love it. My kids look forward to it. And but you don't always anticipate the things that could happen. I remember writing a blog years ago just about the traffic, and the sheer amount of people that are just coming into the area. We always forget that we live in a place where people come to vacation. This is a paradise to many. And I think sometimes as a native here, I sometimes take it for granted, but droves of people come into the area during the holidays. So it's lots of traffic. You can think about the shopping malls and the outlets and those districts and areas where there's, quite a bit of activity, can lead to car accidents and things of that nature, people that don't necessarily live here in the state. And so if there's any advice just on that particular topic, and we'll obviously get into some other things, but is there any advice you can think of to people that are, being basically on the roads, and you have people from all over the state, different parts of the country, maybe even of the world. They're in rental cars and they come in from other parts of the country or other parts of the globe to visit family. And what do you know? You have an accident.
Yes.
What are some things that you think might be timely to talk about when it comes to that?
First, just an overall observation, which probably isn't unique to us as personal injury lawyers, but because we see and deal with the consequences of maybe a loss of attention that causes an accident, that I just think it's the kind of thing, everybody is somewhat stressed during the holiday. It just goes with the territory.
It does.
Yeah. And that what goes along with stress often is maybe not being quite as focused. And so that's something to be really tuned into because of what you were saying, which is, we're in the season. So we have lots of winter residents that maybe don't, they're coming into the area, but they're not here. They're adding to the amount of traffic we have, and they're not here during the rest of the year.
Right.
And then huge numbers of tourists, huge. I mean, of course, being a Florida native, you as well. Yeah, it's been a little bit chilly. Yeah, so many people want to get away from that, understandably so. And
oh my gosh, you see the snowstorms up north that they're dealing with, and northern New York and Pennsylvania. It's just like snow, and cars are buried.
And I can't even imagine if we were. I've never lived in the snow, so it'd be a whole different set of things we could talk about if we were doing the show up north. But
thank God we're not.
And we can breathe a sigh of relief. The hurricane season is over, so we can rest for about 7 months or so and not worry about that. But so I would say that probably the most important thing is just to be actually more alert, more aware, more focused than you would otherwise be, and that's something that you just should be thinking about when you get in the car. And it's very hard because normally, people are kind of rushing around to different things.
Especially this time of year.
Yeah. And there can be a lot of situations. I was thinking about a case I had a couple of years ago where there was an automobile accident. It was a rental car that was involved. The person driving the car was from Spain with her boyfriend here visiting his father, I think, or something like that.
Right.
And those can be quite complicated in that particular situation. Fortunately, the car was actually rented by the father who was a resident.
I see. Okay.
And so that made the insurance issues a little simpler.
Good.
But they often are very complicated.
They can get tricky.
And actually, you can really be out of luck because under the law, the rental cars, they're not going to be responsible, basically. And so under those circumstances, your personal insurance becomes a much more important factor.
So much more important. I know we definitely reiterate this time and time again, but you brought up an excellent point, because I think Brian and I talked about this on one of our shows about the Graves Amendment and how that federal law insulates, rental car companies who are in the business of renting vehicles. You cannot sue them just by virtue of them owning the vehicle. And so just because the person is riding or driving a vehicle that is owned by a rental car company does not, make them liable. And so they may have a small $10,000 policy or such,
or not. But if they have a policy, it's going to be small.
Exactly right.
And you're going to be relying on the policy of the driver, which could be normal if they are a Florida resident, or but if they are outside of the country or outside of our jurisdiction, even just outside of the state, totally different situation. And you can easily, and our client in the case I was just referring to, he had significant injuries. And so it was he did have uninsured motorist coverage, which would have helped him.
That's exactly the point. Yeah.
But it's a whole different thing. And so you're going to have large numbers of people that will be in the category of driving a rental car over the holidays.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. And maybe even more so than normal. There's still quite a bit of people that are displaced from their homes and their vehicles because of the storm.
Right.
And we don't realize that was just 2 months ago. You know, and a lot of those individuals are still without cars. They're still without places to live. So that's changing the traffic patterns as well. And they're in these replacement vehicles. So there could be a lot of layers of insurance issues that can come up. And so you're even more vulnerable, I think, in this time of year when there's lots of distractions, as you said, lots of stress. There's kids, there's shopping, there's tight spaces, and you're maneuvering at the mall, and things happen. And so I think your point is one of the best. I think we always have to go back to the uninsured motorist coverage. I actually was speaking with someone this week who had a hefty policy in bodily injury. I think they had a $300,000 bodily injury policy and had rejected the UN.
Because until you've gone through it, the person has really no reason to even understand it. It's not.
And they don't quite understand. I don't know that anybody had ever explained it. I don't know that they had an agent or anyone who actually sat down and went over the coverages with them and helped them understand what the rejection and the waiver was about. And sadly, they did not have that UM coverage. They had plenty of coverage to cover the other individual had they been at fault and they had injured someone in an auto accident, but none to protect themselves.
And that's the other thing. People just, we don't think, and I mean, you don't want to be negative, obviously, but you just don't think in terms of something happening that really would be a pretty significant problem for you, particularly if there was no insurance on the other end.
Right.
So it's you want to be prepared. So that's really kind of the most important thing to do. And probably, as we kind of go to the end of the year, it's a good time to. No one wants to do it during the holiday, but maybe right after. But it is a good time to review your insurance coverages. Be sure of what you've got. We always invite people to feel free to call, and we'd be happy to give a short consultation on something like that because
it doesn't take very long.
It really doesn't, and it's just so important to be sure of the coverage you have and to understand what it actually will cover you for.
Right. I was quite proud of one of my clients. We do our annual. Client appreciation picnic. We do it every year. We actually hadn't been doing it for a couple of years because of COVID, but we brought it back this year. And there was a client who sadly was in that situation in the past where she had not previously had but I had that conversation with her. And she came over to me and she's like, "You'll be proud to know that I added it to my policy." And I said, "That's wonderful because at the end of the day, you just never know when you need it."
Yeah, and you hope you never do. And I'm sure that's a part of what happens. It's it's going to be some additional premium.
Mm-hmm.
But in the scheme of things, it's typically not that much more to provide coverage for you and occupants in your vehicle that will serve you well if you're in an accident that's of any significance and the person who caused it doesn't have insurance.
Right. And in these parking lot accidents, a lot of times there's not going to be any police report or anything like that. So it's really important that you document things if you are in an accident in a shopping mall or parking lot, because a lot of times the carriers will categorize these as low impact or low velocity, and they'll try to make the argument of causation that, oh, your injuries couldn't have come from something like that. It's just, a minor parking lot impact. That's why it's important to document, the damage to the vehicles and any other kind of debris that maybe have fallen off the vehicles, marks, signage, witnesses, those sorts of things. Because you'd be surprised what people hear and see when they're in the parking lot, like, wow, that was loud or that was a big impact. And if you can get the names of those individuals to be able to assist you in the future, because sometimes those parking lot injuries and accidents can cause a great amount of injury.
It is surprising. I mean,
they will certainly try to minimize.
Right. And I mean, you would think about it. You think, oh, well, it's just a parking lot. How much velocity could you get going? Well, you'd be surprised.
Exactly.
It's really a very dear friend of mine who was literally seated in the car waiting on his wife who'd gone in the grocery store, and he was in the handicap lane, and then the vehicle on the other side of him was an older lady, and she just made a mistake and hit the accelerator and went literally right up over the top of his car.
Oh, my
it was
goodness.
Unbelievable. It was a very significant accident in a parking lot.
Right.
And in that scenario, of course, today it's always very traumatizing when you go through an accident. You're kind of in shock, but most people have their camera on their cell phone, and so you just take a couple of snapshots,
take those photos,
so that there's something that does document what has occurred. Because as you point out, that in a parking lot setting, you can be in a situation where the police may not feel they have the time to respond, depending on what's going on.
Sure, and then you may not get access to video from the shopping mart or the grocery store or wherever it occurs. And if there is video, a lot of times they require you to subpoena it before they'll even release it to you. And so you can help yourself by documenting it yourself.
And you should do it regardless, because I know, having practiced personal injury law for so long, but we're all human beings too. We always want to assume that everything's going to be fine. And hopefully, many times it is.
You always hope that it is.
Absolutely.
Right.
You want a positive outlook. But if you're in an accident, you don't actually know whether you're going to have some issue, minor or a little more than minor, until a few days have transpired often, because the body is funny. The shock of an accident, the adrenaline that flows, the focus that you have on what's going on, the immediate denial that we all go through. It's like, this isn't going to stop me from doing anything I plan to do today. And as I say, hopefully you will. And many times people are, but unfortunately, a significant number of times there are issues that you get home, and after a few hours, your back is killing you, your neck is killing you. And it's like, oh my goodness. And of course, in that scenario, as we've talked about in other shows, the way Florida law is set up, in order to take advantage of your personal injury protection.
You read my mind.
Yep. In order to take advantage of that, you got to get yourself to the hospital or an urgent care or see a doctor to document what's going on, even if it's not terrible at the moment. At least get it on record that if you're having any issue at all,
you've only got 14 days to do that. And you'd be surprised the number of people who try to get better on their own.
Right.
And they don't realize that 14-day time clock is ticking, and they're paying premiums for the PIP insurance that they have.
And you don't want to lose. No, you don't want to lose the benefit of that, because, as everyone knows, medical care is very expensive.
Yes.
Yeah, and you definitely want the benefit of that rather than having to use your health insurance, or sometimes people don't have health insurance, or they have a large deductible and it wouldn't actually cover.
Exactly right, and then they end up having all these copays and different things. from that because they didn't properly preserve that PIP benefit that they are entitled to. So definitely treat right away if you find yourself in that scenario. But I think the biggest takeaway I think is really important that you mentioned is be extra vigilant during this time of year. There's just so much going on, so much stress, as well as just the hustle and bustle of the holidays that
yes,
it's easy to
I would say I had
get
a friend of mine just recently was in an automobile accident, but thank goodness she's all right.
Okay.
But it was kind of shocking, but she was at an intersection, one of our favorite intersections at Ulmerton and Belcher, which is a very busy intersection. She was in the early morning hours, but a car blew a red light. And in that scenario,
that's a pretty dangerous intersection.
Very dangerous. But I would say, particularly in the environment we're talking about now, the holiday season, where people aren't necessarily paying attention, they have something else on their mind, or heaven forbid that the person has maybe been out partying and maybe has had something to drink.
Right.
It is altered in their ability to perceive. But regardless, so you always remember when my father taught me to drive, it was the defensive driving. Look ahead, look where you'd go if somebody does something, try to anticipate. And these are all things we sort of know, but it's hard to get ourselves to have that presence of mind. And yet my friend, which it was not her fault, she wasn't ticketed, the other driver was, but she kept going back and forth thinking, could I have done something to avoid it?
Sure.
And in that scenario, you and I know, because of the intersection being an area of high frequency of accidents, never assume anything. Always be looking to try to have a sense of, and you can't obviously
try to avoid that intersection whenever I can.
Then there's that too. And I'll have to admit, I don't on purpose go down US 19 all that much.
Fortunately, I don't have much of a choice because I live in St. Pete, so I drive that way. But so yes, I think the overall takeaway is drive defensively. Do not be distracted. Put down the phone.
Oh yes. That's probably the worst of all, isn't it?
Yeah, you just got to be more aware. I know we all see it when we're driving down the road, and it's like that car is kind of swerving a little bit, and then you get next to them, and it's like, oh, there's the phone right up by their face, and they're texting and driving or watching something. Who knows?
Yeah.
And even our own children can be distractions, or your guests, people that you're riding, you're talking, and you're engaged in a conversation, and before you know it, you're not really focusing on the road. So just would certainly encourage people to be thinking about that during the holidays. But let's get back to the parties, the fun, the festivities, inviting people into your home, right? And, things happen. And I can think of quite a lot of different scenarios where you've got this nice spread, it's nicely decorated, the drinks are flowing, and someone trips and falls. There's a slip and fall, or someone's had too much to drink and they fall, or there's something that occurs in your home, where does the liability fall there?
Right. And that's something, it's so always, in order to be responsible, you have to have been what the law calls negligent, meaning that you did not act with reasonable care. But the problem with that, and we would say as lawyers, what do lawyers do? I always explain to clients when we're in a mediation, which is a settlement conference, is that what lawyers do is we take whatever set of facts we've got and build an argument in favor of our side of the case. That's our job.
That's our job.
And that is really the genius of our system, which, although very imperfect and flawed, is still the best in the world.
Right.
But it's so we love to debate. This is part and parcel of our profession. This is not how individuals think, and it's in some ways probably pretty offensive to them. But you do have to think about that. So even though I think of a friend who actually had a gathering some years ago, and in her home has a sunken. It's a step up to the living room part, and the dining area is down. So there's a step. Well, there's nothing wrong with it, really. Okay. But, and there was really a question about the person that had had the experience and claimed that they had fallen and hurt themselves. But putting all that aside, because, I don't know particularly what occurred, and I don't think that my friend actually saw it occur, but she was the recipient of a claim about it. And now, if you have homeowners insurance, and it's always a very good idea to have homeowners insurance,
certainly,
because you may not actually have acted negligently, but if someone brings a claim against you, then you're in a situation where if you have homeowners insurance, you turn it over to your insurance carrier. They will hire a lawyer,
defense,
and they will evaluate it and take that off of your hands, because it is somewhat in the eye of the beholder. But in a home setting, you should personally be aware when you're inviting people there that it is a circumstance where you want to avoid any obvious things that could be tripping hazards, that sort of thing. Yeah. And obviously it would be very prudent to be wise about the service of alcohol and how that is handled. Now, interestingly, the law really, unless you are a vendor like a bar, in that scenario, the law would hold the bar or restaurant responsible in a pretty limited set of circumstances, which may surprise people. But it's you would have to be if they knew that the person was a habitual.
There has to be some knowledge there.
Addict, in effect, an alcoholic,
or drunkard, or however they defined it.
And if the person was underage, then in those circumstances, the law permits and holds potential liability in the restaurant establishment. And in a sense, that's kind of rooted in the idea of negligence, of being aware of the circumstance. Generally speaking, each adult is responsible for themselves. But going back to what I said a moment ago, you could be responsible and liable, but you really also want to protect yourself from being accused of such a thing too.
Absolutely.
Because lawyers are going to look at the case and they're going to look to say, all right, generally speaking, a social host is not going to be responsible for somebody who drank too much going out and having an accident or something. But if there is some element of arguable negligence, if there was some exercise of control, say you really became aware of what the person's situation was, you put them in a bedroom because you knew they had no business driving, and you said, you're not going anywhere. And then you kind of walked away and out the person went and they took off. Now that's a scenario in which an argument could be made that there was negligence. So it's so we don't want to put a damper on anybody's fun because this is a wonderful time of year, and getting together with friends and family is
want to
wonderful.
Prepare you.
Exactly. But it is, again, like when we started the show talking about, well, let's be a little bit more focused and aware.
Exactly.
When we're driving. Well, absolutely. When you're hosting a wonderful event, especially one of any size, where you obviously might not even know exactly what's going on. You just want to do the best you can for it to be safe. And I would say, just as a matter of personal prudence, notice your guests and try to encourage the designated driver, or make sure somebody gets an Uber if there's a situation, because obviously you don't want anything to happen to anybody, and you don't want to face any type of a claim as well.
Exactly right. And I don't know if the standard is any different. And if you don't know, that's fine. So I'm just throwing this out there. But I think in office Christmas parties, when you have employers that may get together in the evenings, the afternoons, or what have you, and they're, or maybe even big corporations where there's fun, there's drinking, there's alcohol, and then the persons leave and they're not in an Uber or some sort of taxi, but they get in their own vehicle and they drive and they cause an accident. Is that scenario the same when it's a company or a corporation versus a social
You've added, there
host.
Are a few extra layers there. So most companies will probably be pretty careful to say this is a voluntary event. The party is, you do not have to come to the party. It's not
mandatory.
Right? It's not a part of your work at all. And in that scenario, the employer is closer to the social host.
Sure.
But you can imagine scenarios in which arguments could be made, and depending on the factual circumstances, that it was a little closer to something that the person was doing because of their employment. So generally speaking, I think that is, if it's disconnected from the employment, it should follow under the normal rules. But a part of what I was saying earlier is and this would be true on both sides. You don't want to have to face a claim, obviously, that you feel isn't meritorious. On the other hand, a person listening to our discussion should also be aware that, if you're in a situation where something happens and it seems on reflection like, maybe it should have been provided for a little better, that's the kind of thing you review with an attorney.
Exactly.
Because in our law, many things are, what I'm talking about now is kind of what we call the common law. And it's a law that develops to try to address situations that are not necessarily covered by a specific law that is passed by our legislature. It's sort of something that evolves over time. And actually, in our case, and coming all the way from England. So there can be situations, obviously negligence it's very fact dependent,
right?
Because there's so many different things. I have early in my career, I realized there are an infinite number of ways you can become injured. It's just endless, And some
this is true.
Yeah, and some of those ways, actually have no relationship to the negligence of some other person. And in that case, we simply suck it up and deal with it.
Right.
But in those instances where there is an element of negligence, which is that duty we owe to everyone basically in our orbit, the law will define pretty carefully where that duty really flows. But as we think of it as people, the people that we're inviting them into our home, we do have a duty to be sure that the premises, that our home is safe, that there's no thing
exactly.
That is going to cause harm.
You could certainly, before you have the party, just do an inventory. Take a look at your property, take a look at your home. Look at the way that it's set up. Make sure there's no tripping hazards or things that could fall or, things that could potentially cause individuals to slip, loose rugs or all kinds of things.
Lighting issues. That can be something you don't think about because you just get used to it.
Because it's your home.
Because it's your home. And, it's not like you're actually required to think of every little thing, obviously, but everything you think of that does avoid an accident, also it avoids an injury to somebody and it avoids any potential legal claim that would be brought against you. So there are a lot of good reasons to kind of think about that type of thing. Yeah.
Right. Exactly right. Before we take a break, I just wanted to remind people of other scenarios because we'll take a quick commercial after this. But I remember having a case where the individual had come to assist a friend in hanging their Christmas decorations. But I may be wrong. I think it may have been actually Halloween, but it was some holiday.
Right?
And they had provided them with a ladder and kind of set it up on this detached garage area. But the detached garage was in pretty bad shape and it was kind of dilapidated. And as he kind of leaned up and began to decorate, it all kind of collapsed. And he ended up falling, breaking his leg. It was pretty bad injury.
Yeah.
And sure enough, a claim was made against the homeowner's policy. So you also have to think of those sorts of things.
And I think people, you kind of presume, and I don't believe that a friend wants necessarily to make a claim, but if it ends up being a more significant injury and the person
he didn't have any insurance,
right? They're kind of in a position where they probably feel somewhat forced to do that, even though they might not want to.
Right.
And so that's a situation of, as a lawyer, no one's using any of my ladders because they've been around a while. They probably are okay, but and again, you can't live your life worrying about everything.
Exactly.
Although as lawyers we kind of do, but
that's our job.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But it is the sort of thing that the safest manner. You do expose yourself somewhat if your ladder's in good condition, there shouldn't be an issue. But if often happens, I think I have ladders that my father might have had, and he's been gone a very long time.
Right.
So you have a situation where
know what the condition
you just don't really
is,
know if. I mean, it looks okay, but unless you just don't really know. So it's not really that wise, and particularly when you hire somebody to come in, it's you really should let them bring their own equipment because then you avoid the problem of potentially facing a claim where there's been an injury for something you honestly really didn't anticipate. But you do expose yourself a little there, and likewise, you should. Oh my goodness. When I think about my family, I mean, one of my second cousins, he would always be getting up on his roof to do this, that, or the other. It's so dangerous. Now you can't tell anybody anything because we all know. I mean, I'm not going up on my roof, but
you don't have to worry about me going on mine either.
but it is dangerous, and there's no question that it is. So it's something that you just have to exercise, some caution and who you're going to let help you. You just have to be aware that, nobody wants anything to happen. Now, having said all of that, if you have homeowners insurance in place, that is what it's for.
That's what it's for.
That's what it's for.
And they will provide a defense.
And also, if it's a situation where something occurred that, we're not perfect. I mean, sometimes I'm going to make it up. Let's just say there's a ladder and it's like, oh, it isn't really in great shape.
Yeah.
And you kind of should have known, really. And nobody expects the injury. An injury occurs. I mean, there can be situations where now at least you have coverage that will, if there's been something that actually you were negligent
the fortunate thing,
then there's a way to provide compensation for the person for their medical bills and that sort of thing. So it's really it's a type of coverage, of course, we've heard a lot about because of the hurricanes and all the issues with that. And if you've got a mortgage, you're going to have homeowners insurance. But that liability component of homeowners insurance is actually a very important coverage to have.
Right. Absolutely. And I was thinking in jest, I said, I guess you could take a picture of something if you're concerned and drop it in the comments, and Lori and I will look at it and let you know what we think.
Go, right. It's like, we're going to be cautious. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a good time to take a short commercial break. Hopefully you've been tuned in. The lines are open, and we're having a discussion about the holiday season, different legal matters that can arise during all the holiday festivities. And of course, I'm here with Lori Robinson answering your legal questions live on the air. We'll be back after the short break, continuing the conversation and hopefully answering your calls at 441-3000. Again, that's 727-441-3000. We'll be right back after the break.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
After a car accident, there are many questions that you need answers to. Who pays for my car repairs? Who pays for the medical bills? What about my lost wages? And more. The personal injury law firm of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes has been answering these questions for their clients for nearly 70 years. Since 1955, they've been a voice of the injured in the legal system. As one of the longest established law firms in Tampa Bay, Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes is here to answer your questions. Listen to their live call-in radio show on this channel every Tuesday evening from 5 to 6 p.m. or call them at 727-796-8282 or visit them at voiceoftheinjured.com. Offices Clearwater, non-attorney spokesperson.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
That's right. And we are back with FLA Law live on the radio. Hopefully you have been tuned in to our live legal call-in talk show where we've been discussing personal injury and civil litigation matters in regards to the holiday season and how certain things can arise, and not always the things that you may anticipate. Of course, we come together to enjoy each other and spend time with our friends and family and just kind of enjoy the reason for the season, and changing gifts and enjoying food and all those great things. But we don't always realize, there can be unanticipated consequences of just the crowds and the gatherings and the different things that come about. And we talked about how the traffic and the cars and, parties and guests and tourists, they can all kind of converge into the perfect storm of, injuries and accidents. The one topic that we haven't touched on yet, which is somewhat similar to what we were talking about before when it comes to inviting guests into your home. But sometimes there's guests that aren't necessarily invited per se, but they are, on your property for, a valid purpose. are delivery drivers.
Sure.
I don't know if you're anything like me, Lori, but I don't really go to the stores as much as I used to. I order just about anything and everything I can online. If I can find the deal online, I'll usually buy it online before I go to the store. Very rarely will I now go to the store looking for a sale, unless it's just an in-store only and I have no choice. Then I'll say, okay, I can't buy it online. I have to go in store for the deal. But if I can get it online and I can have it shipped to my home, that's usually the way I'll do it these days. And I think most people are.
I think so as well.
Moving to that.
But it's kind of shocking to see the mall, have many fewer stores and that sort of thing. And I have to admit, I don't really go out myself anymore so much, when it's so easy to order things online now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I was actually kind of shocked. On Black Friday, I saw a few friends and close people that were out shopping, and they had kind of posted some videos and photos of the crowds. And I was like, wow, people still do that.
I think it's a little bit of like an event, know.
Yeah, I think it's just more so for the sake of doing it, just to be doing it. But it was literally like cars lined up on the side of the highway because there was no actual parking in the parking lot. And I was like, wow.
That is the definition of something I personally do not want to do.
Yeah,
but
are the sales even that good? But anyway, going back to the question is that delivery drivers now are bringing us our Christmas to our doorstep.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And there's so many. There's obviously the usual UPS, FedEx, but now there's obviously Amazon, and then you have these independent contractors who drive their own cars, but they're delivering Amazon packages.
Yes, there's all kinds of people doing that now.
And they come onto your property and they drop off your packages on your doorstep. But my question is, what if they get injured on your property when they're bringing that package to your home? What happens there, and what liability do I have? What liabilities does their employer have? What are kind of the things there?
And it's going to go right back to that. Is there negligence? Did you? And I'm sitting here thinking, even right now, because of course of the end of daylight savings, so it gets dark.
It does,
6 o'clock or whatever. Which
it's already getting dark outside.
I know, and so I'm thinking my front porch area, or like where the front door is not really well lit. So you can imagine. So if a person, so let's say, and of course the drivers, they're trying to move as fast as they can. But if somebody delivers something. And then I'm going to turn the light on after I'm saying all of this on the radio. But if I have like a little area where a tree is lifted up the sidewalk or the driveway, tripping hazard,
kind of like a height differential there,
and that happens to every property. People have these kind of things.
Tree uproot is very common.
And I had put out before the hurricanes. I found these solar lamps because I thought, Laura, you're a personal injury attorney. You should really have, because I noticed
better lighting there.
That when I'm taking the dog out, I noticed, that's kind of a tripping hazard. Well, if someone tripped because of the poor lighting, again, remember, it has to be some element of negligence.
Right.
But it is poorly lit, and if it's dark, then that person, if they were a delivery driver, they would have a workers' compensation claim, probably, most likely. If they were an independent contractor, it might be a little different, but, they'd have something in that way. But you're concerned more of what would your responsibility be as the homeowner.
Sure.
And you absolutely could face a claim if there was an argument that you had been negligent, that the condition of your premises wasn't safe, because a person like a delivery driver is an invitee. You are inviting them to come to the property to make the delivery. And so there could be I had a case some years ago. There lots of things can happen. Now my dogs are perfect angels, but if you
not all dogs are.
No, they're not. And I had one of our clients got bit by a dog.
Yes, I didn't think about that.
And the poor fellow, he's just making his delivery.
Yeah.
But certainly conditions of the premises, lighting, I think, is something that people don't necessarily think about.
Tripping hazards,
right?
Like you mentioned, tree uproot, or even the material that makes up your walkway or your porch. And the reason why I think about it is that, again, example of my own home, there was some sort of tile that when we bought the home, I think it was supposed to be like indoor, outdoor, but in my opinion, it was way too slippery when it got wet. And it's Florida. It gets wet, and people deliver packages when it's wet. And it was like, oh my gosh, someone's going to slip and fall.
And that's a classic example of something that we would be tuned into because of what we do, but it's real. So, fortunately, most times, even if a person slips, they're going to be okay, hopefully. But where the problem can really become more of an issue for you is if, unfortunately, maybe somebody falls and they really hurt their back bad and they have to have a back surgery or some significant ongoing treatment. You don't want any of that, obviously, for anybody, but also you want to be protected in that situation. So that is something to be aware of. Actually, it's funny, we're talking about this because a friend of mine was talking to me about how his family home, his father had set it up, doesn't have homeowners insurance, is, quote, self-insured for years. And self-insured means if something happens, and you're found responsible, you have to pay for it.
It's yourself that's paying. Yeah.
But he was getting a little advice from other siblings about whether his mother is living in the home now, and she's quite elderly, whether they needed the liability component of that insurance.
I see.
And so we talked a little bit. He kept the place immaculate, but it's a risk you take because there were people coming onto the property, nursing attendants to stay with his mother, kind of thing. And so there is exposure in that situation. If
something
God forbid,
to consider.
If something happens, so your first level, of course, is to look around and try to avoid any hazards.
Right.
And if you're doing that, hopefully all will be well. But the next level of protection is the liability insurance in the event that somebody is injured and you are accused of having been negligent, then you're in a situation to respond to it, give it to the lawyer, the insurance company takes care of it from there. And as I said a moment ago, and also, God forbid, if something did happen where nobody is perfect, no one likes to be the recipient of a lawsuit. And we know that because when we sue people, no one likes that.
Right.
And there's a natural tendency to think in terms of someone, maybe kind of people are always thinking that there might be a fraudulent aspect to it or the person's making more of it. And that's not that never occurs. Yeah. We hope it doesn't. And we certainly try to avoid that with our own clients, obviously.
Of course.
But the reality is we're human beings. Yeah. So you're not going to catch everything. And that it's not something that you should beat yourself up over. You do the best you can. Exactly. But this is a way to kind of protect yourself and anyone who might be injured by having the appropriate insurance to cover for that.
Yeah, and even if you're thinking you're like, oh, this holiday show, I'm a Grinch, bah humbug. I don't do parties. I don't go to parties. I don't have people at my house, so this doesn't apply to me. But like we said, just about everybody gets deliveries to their home these days. So these are practical things that you should all think about and consider.
Yeah, you make your own decision as to your particular circumstance, but I think it's the kind of thing probably many people wouldn't have thought about without having it brought up.
Exactly right. And I think you also made a good point for the delivery drivers out there, and there's usually more this time of year. A lot of people kind of pick up the seasonal delivery driving gigs that you not only, if you end up in that situation where you're hurt on someone's property or a business property or however the situation may go, document. Even nowadays, I think all the drivers kind of take a picture of the package or whatnot. But you have to document what it was that caused you to fall. Doesn't happen as much as it used to, but I remember in the beginning of my career, a lot of times I'm like, well, do you have a photo of what caused you to fall? And they're like, oh, no, not really. I can try to go back and find it. Mm-hmm. It's like, take a picture.
Yes, today, most people would be able to do that. Yeah. Now, obviously, it's hard to have that presence of mind.
Exactly. After you've kind of just been hurt, you're not necessarily thinking about, let me take a photo. But it's so important because quickly things can change. And you just may not be able to go back and see it the way it was at the time that it happened. And
all of the arguments, was kind of laying out why, as a homeowner, you want this protection for yourself. But flipping the side of this, and you're the injured party, that homeowner is going to be through their lawyer, and the insurance company is going to be trying to show that somehow it was really your fault. You weren't paying attention. So documenting what the actual condition was is very important, because it's not enough that the person simply had an accident on the property. You have to be able to show that there was some degree of negligence. And that's something you would consult with an attorney about, who's aware of the types of things that should be happening. But without good documentation of what the condition was, it can be quite difficult. And so that is very, very helpful if you're able to document it.
Right. And you don't ever really want to be the injured person relying on the other party to provide you with the evidence that you need. When you start out that way, you're already a little bit behind the curve. So,
and you hope nothing happened. I think people would sometimes they'll feel funny, like, well, that wasn't my first thought. We always hope that we're going to be fine. And many times you will be. But if something happens that raises any question at all about the possibility of where you may end up at some point down the road, just take a picture. Just do something that documents what occurred. If it isn't anything in the future, great. But if it is, you'll be glad that you have that evidence, and the attorney you consult will be very glad.
Exceedingly glad. Yes. And of course, we give a shout out to our delivery drivers. We love all the delivery drivers. They work extremely hard this time of year. I've seen many social media posts of people that leave like treats and drinks on their porch for the men and women that deliver their packages, which I think is obviously a very, very kind gesture. So, of course, be considerate of those individuals.
Yeah, we have the little kind of like gift bags with some water and stuff at the front office, of the office.
Very, very, very thoughtful thing to do especially if you've got multiple delivery drivers coming to your home all the time.
Yes.
That'd be nice to do. So hopefully you've enjoyed the content tonight of the show. I hope everyone obviously is safe and festive, but enjoying the holidays in a safe way. And of course, if you find yourself hurt or injured, you can always give us a call at the office, which is 727-796-8282. As you know, this has been FLA Law live on the radio. We come to you every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. Thank you for joining us, Lori. Thank you for joining me as my co-host. And we will see you all next Tuesday at 5.